In this video, I want to tell you a story about what was at one point the highest grossing movie of all time. This story, however, is also a mystery, one that to date has never been solved. This is a story about the making of the Titanic and how, on one night shoot, the cast's lives were forever changed. Titanic is a movie that was released in 1997 and filmed during 1996. One of the first locations that was used for filming was the Russian scientific research vessel named the Academic Mislav Keldysh. I could be wrong, I just said Mislav because I know that guy from the Friendly Geordies podcast. The ship was docked for filming in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, which is a province in Canada. On the night of August 9th, 1996, the cast and crew that were filming on location sat down to enjoy their lunch, which was at about midnight. On the menu for the night was clam chowder, which I just have to say, looks absolutely rancid. How are you gonna make a soup that almost looks indistinguishable from vomit and say that it's the best thing that Maine has to offer? All seemed fine on the set until one member of the crew turned to another and said, "I feel really strange. I feel like I'm on something." And for extra cool guy points, he added in, "And you can trust me, I would know what being on something feels like." In almost comedic timing, the crew members looked into a hallway and saw James Cameron with his hand on his mouth and stomach running for the bathroom while being chased by an extra that was yelling, "There's something in me, get it out." Not long after this, many other members of the cast and crew started having similar adverse reactions after eating, which resulted in more than 50 people being taken to the nearest hospital, including actor Bill Paxton and the director James Cameron. Initially, it was just treated as food poisoning and everyone was moved into beds and put into cubicles with the curtains drawn. But what started to eventually happen was that people started getting up out of their beds and talking to each other, which eventually resulted in almost all of the patients out of their beds. This was obviously very unusual for the doctors and nurses to see, considering that most people with food poisoning would rather get a bullet to their head than move a single muscle. So the behavior started to make a lot more sense when it was discovered that this wasn't a food poisoning case, and rather what was actually happening was that every patient they had just admitted was tripping balls. It was discovered and eventually pieced together that what had happened was an unknown person, likely a crew member, put the dissociative drug PCP into the chowder, which resulted in everyone who ate it getting incredibly high. Now, for those of you who don't know, PCP, or phencyclidine, is a hallucinogen that may include feelings of strength, power, and invulnerability, as well as a numbing effect on the mind, as just some of the effects that you can receive after having it. PCP was initially made in 1956, and its intended use was an anesthetic medication for operating procedures. Although after a bit of time, eventually ketamine was discovered and was found to be better used as an anesthetic, so PCP was switched out. And just like ketamine, PCP was being used as a recreational drug almost as soon as it was introduced, and when tripping on PCP, some doses of the drug occasionally appear to induce a psychotic state, which luckily did not appear to have happened for members on the set. However, other psychological effects such as severe changes in body image, loss of ego boundaries, paranoia, are reported to happen to users of PCP. So who cares, right? It's just a fun, silly little prank. Why am I talking about it? Well, the thing is, with PCP, some of the more threatening side effects can include seizures, going into comas, and an increased risk of suicide. So it was taken pretty seriously by hospital staff when it was discovered exactly what they were dealing with. But by that point, it was getting a bit too hard to contain everyone. And in the words of the director James Cameron, by the end of the night, there would be crew members conga dancing and racing wheelchairs through a hospital corridor. Although James Cameron did throw up relatively early in the night before the drug could take its full effect, the director did still feel the effects of PCP. At one point, he was apparently stabbed in the face with a pen, to which his response was to bleed and laugh. Another actor who was in the hospital also described what he saw as people just rolling around, completely out of it, with one crew member running around screaming, "I need a priest." During all of the mayhem within the hospital, actor Bill Paxton left and on his way out turned to Cameron to say, "Jim, I'm not gonna hang out here. This is bedlam." And when asked what he was gonna do after signing himself out of the hospital, Paxton replied, "I'm gonna wander back to the set and just drink a case of beer." Which seems like what he actually did, because at around 4 a.m. when things were winding down, a crew member saw Cameron walking towards a trailer with a bottle of scotch and Bill Paxton next to him with a bag of joints. And according to the crew member, member, the three of them went into the trailer together and just chilled out after the events of the night. Fair enough. On August 28th, the Halifax Regional Police Service announced a criminal investigation into the matter. They wanted to find out and get to the bottom of who spiked the chowder. The police began to narrow down on possible suspects, which kinda came down to three possibilities: a cook, an actor, or a crew member. But according to the CEO of the catering company, it was the Hollywood crowd bringing in the psychedelics, which, I mean, given the party reputation of Hollywood, then yeah, this makes a lot of sense, which the CEO even hinted at as he clarified his response by saying it was supposed to be like a party thing that got carried away. So moving away from the possibility of a cook being involved, let's have a look at the actors. One actor in particular named Susie Amos didn't want to eat the chowder that night, and because of that, did not have to go through this ordeal. However, it doesn't look like anybody seriously suspected her, and the police swiftly moved on. It was said though that, especially on the Titanic set, James Cameron was just a real asshole when he was in the director's chair. Which, yeah, you can be like, oh, it's his vision and he's just making his cut of the movie. But also, like, how many directors have you heard that are chill to work with and also can make a good movie, right? Like, it's not a prerequisite of a good director to also be a prick. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it was suspected that maybe Cameron's partner at the time did it as a joke to get him high because of his uptight attitude. You know, just as a way to lighten the mood. But it also doesn't seem like this makes a whole heap of sense either, considering that PCP isn't really like a party drug, you know? I would think that even in the 90s, you would still be like, hey, let's do some like MDMA. Let's take some ecstasy. You know, fuck it, ball. Get some like meth or something. It just seems like a very specific drug. But finally, the last place you would look would be any member of the crew. And this seems to be where there's actually some kind of a lead. James Cameron has never publicly named a suspect, but he has said that he is pretty sure he knows who's responsible. He has said that they had fired a crew member the day before the chowder incident because they were creating trouble with the caterers. He went on to say that he believed the poisoning was this idiot's plan to get back at the caterers, whom of course we promptly fired the next day. So it worked. That person has never been publicly named or ever charged. In fact, the Halifax Police Department investigated the matter for 2.5 years, and ultimately, the investigation was closed in February 1999, with the person behind the poisoning never being caught. Luckily for everyone involved, this event was ultimately harmless. Production continued, nobody died, and nobody was seriously injured. I guess the police didn't really consider a pencil to the face as a serious injury, but, you know, that's life, kid. The whole incident actually ended up becoming a bit of a joke on the set, a bit of a meme, you might say. And it actually got to the point where one of the guys from the art department ended up making a commemorative t-shirt that had the bowl of chowder that was just on the shirt and handed it out to the crew. To this day, no one knows for sure what happened that night. Whether the culprit of the spiking was a caterer, a disgruntled actor, or a recently fired crew member. Chances are, we will never know. But you know what we will know? Well, more specifically, what I will know. How many of you hit the subscribe button after watching this video? And you like seeing that number go up, don't you? Don't make me put PCP in your, I don't know. I got nothing. Your mom. Don't make me put PCP in your mum's pussy. Click the subscribe button. And if you liked the video, hit like on that as well. And if you want to, stick around to see more videos of weird topics that I personally just find interesting. And hopefully you did as well. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.